contains the following subjects: Officer of the Watch's duties and responsibilities. The learning objectives for this chapter are familiarization with the duties of the Officer of the Watch, understanding the responsibility of being in charge of a navigation watch, the Officer of the Watch is the Master's representative and is in charge of the bridge until properly relieved. His primary duties can be divided into three main groups: watchkeeping, navigation, radio communications. He is at all times responsible for safe navigation and for complying with call regs. The watchkeeping duties of the Officer of the Watch include maintaining a lookout and general surveillance of the ship, collision avoidance in compliance with call regs, recording bridge activities, and making regular checks on the navigational equipment in use. Procedures for handing over the watch and calling for support on the bridge should be in place and fully understood and accepted by the Officer of the Watch. The navigational duties of the Officer of the Watch are based upon the need to execute the passage plan safely and monitor the progress of the ship against that plan and the Master's standing orders. It is the navigator's duty to double-check all navigation information whenever possible, in order to detect instrument errors and minimize the effect of the human element. With the introduction of the Global Maritime Distress and Safety System, GMDSS, radio communications have become an important element in the functions of the Officer of the Watch, who will be responsible for maintaining a continuous radio watch at sea. During distress incidents, one of the qualified radio personnel should be assigned to have primary responsibility for radio communications. The Officer of the Watch will normally have to deal with a number of duties, in addition to the primary duties of watchkeeping, navigation, and communication. Examples of such duties are cargo monitoring, general communications, engine monitoring, supervision of ship safety systems, etc. Additional duties should under no circumstances interfere with the exercise of primary duties. In compliance with the call regs, a proper lookout should be kept at all times in order to maintain a continuous vigilance by sight and hearing, as well as by all other available means. According to STCW, the Officer of the Watch may be the sole lookout in daylight if weather, visibility, traffic density, and other relevant safety parameters are taken into account. The Officer of the Watch must maintain a high level of general awareness about the ship and its day-to-day operations. Compliance with the call regs should always be executed and correct light and other signals displayed. The Officer of the Watch should not expect all other ships to show correct signals, and great care should be taken when passing another ship at close range. Periodic checks of navigational equipment according to a proven and established maintenance system, followed by good procedures, checking orders, checking electronic equipment and computer-based systems at regular intervals, are not only recommended but a necessity in order to operate a ship within acceptable safety margins. Operational checks on navigational equipment should be undertaken when preparing for sea and prior to port entry. After lengthy ocean passages and before entering restricted coastal waters, it is also important to check that full engine and steering maneuverability are available. While underway, good practice requires the officer of the watch to check that orders are being correctly followed. The officer of the watch should undertake daily tests and checks on the bridge equipment, including the following. Manual steering should be tested at least once a watch when the automatic pilot is in use. Gyro and magnetic compass errors should be checked at least once a watch and after major course alteration. Compass repeaters should be synchronized, including repeaters mounted off the bridge. Checks on electronic equipment should both confirm that the piece of equipment is functioning properly and it is successfully communicating to any bridge system to which it is connected. Electronic equipment systems should be checked to ensure that configuration settings important for correct interfacing between pieces of equipment have not changed. To ensure adequate performance, information from electronic equipment should always be compared and verified against information from different independent sources. The officer of the watch should not hand over the watch if there is any reason to believe that the relieving officer is unfit to or is temporarily unable to carry out his duties effectively. Before taking over the watch, the relieving officer must be satisfied as to the ship's position and confirm its intended track, course and speed and engine controls as appropriate, as well as noting any dangers to navigation expected to be encountered during his watch. The officer of the watch should execute the passage plan as prepared and monitor the progress of the ship relative to that plan. If a temporary deviation from the voyage plan is made, he should return to the plan as soon as it is safe to do so. If the officer of the watch has to deviate from the voyage plan for any reason, the master should be informed about the action taken. If the captain decides to deviate from the voyage plan, the plan needs to be formally amended and briefing on the new plan given to the other members of the bridge team. Good navigational practice demands that the officer of the watch understands the capabilities and limitations of the navigational aids and systems being used, and continually monitors their performance. Uses the echo sounder to monitor changes in water depth. Uses dead reckoning techniques to check position fixes. Cross-checks position fixes using independent sources of information whenever possible. Uses visual navigation aids to support electronic position fixing methods. does not become over-reliant on automated navigational equipment. Checks instrument calculated positions visually whenever possible. When in doubt, call the master. Care must be exercised when taking geographical positions from electronic position fixing systems like GPS and plotting these onto charts. The officer of the watch should bear in mind that if the chart datum differs from the datum used by the position fixing system, a datum correction must be applied before the position is plotted on the chart. In case charts based on very old survey data are used, use of visual and/or radar navigation should be used to maintain safe distance from land. Using raw GPS positions together with old survey maps can be very dangerous in restricted areas. As a general rule, navigation should be carried out on the most suitable large-scale chart available, and the position of the ship should be fixed at frequent intervals. Visual and radar position fixing should be used whenever possible. In coastal waters, routing schemes, ship reporting systems, and VTS may require reports and communication. Knowledge of the ship's draft, stability conditions, and maneuvering characteristics are all important parameters to be taken into account. The pilot is expected to have special knowledge about navigation in local waters. Depending on local pilotage laws, the master may delegate the conduct of the ship to the pilot, who directs the navigation of the ship in close cooperation with the officer of the watch and/or the master. The presence of a pilot does not relieve the master or the officer of the watch of their duties and obligations for the safety of the ship. Both should be prepared to exercise their right not to proceed to a point where the ship is put in a dangerous situation. The safe progress of the ship along the planned tracks should be closely monitored at all times. This includes, amongst other things, fixing the ship's position and checking the under-keel clearance. Verbal orders from the pilot must also be checked to confirm that they have been correctly carried out. When the master leaves the bridge, the officer of the watch should always seek clarification from the pilot when in doubt as to the pilot's actions and intentions. If a satisfactory explanation is not given, the officer of the watch should notify the master immediately, taking whatever action is necessary before the master arrives. It is recommended that communication between pilot and the bridge team is conducted in English. To comply with the coal regs, ships should at all times proceed at safe speed. In restricted visibility, safe speed may require a reduction in service speed to reduce the stopping distance of the ship. Near ice, ships are specifically required to proceed at moderate speeds. Speed changes may be required to avoid a collision in circumstances where the ship is unable to alter course. Safe speed does not mean that all ships operating in the same area, for example during restricted visibility, should proceed with the same speed. Today, most ships are steered by autopilot most of the time. Modern autopilot and track-keeping systems steer the ship with high course accuracy and very little use of rudder. However, in areas of high traffic density, during reduced visibility and other potentially hazardous situations, a helmsman should be available on the bridge, ready to take over steering control immediately. Changing to manual steering should be done in good time. It should also be routinely and regularly tested in open water to confirm that all is in good order. The officer of the watch must be familiar with the operation of the steering systems, so that no delay is incurred in the event of a hasty changeover being required. The officer of the watch should normally be in possession of a general operator's certificate. The officer of the watch is responsible for compliance with the radio watchkeeping requirements of SOLAS, the ITU radio regulations, and any local watchkeeping rules. The following basic principles apply to all communication carried out by radio. Absolute priority should be given to distress, urgency, and safety communications. Interference with other radio users should be avoided. Frequencies should be used for their correct purpose. The officer of the watch should be aware that ships have search and rescue obligations under SOLAS. Ships that are in a position to provide assistance on receiving a signal from any source that persons are in distress at sea are bound to proceed with all speed to their assistance. During search and rescue operations, ship-to-ship communication should be by VHF or medium frequency. Satellite channels should be kept free for communications with rescue coordination centers. On the following pages, you will be asked some questions.